what seems to be inevitable from the outside world. Why is it not inevitable within the bank? And this is also important because of request to pay, because request to pay is really the missing link that connects invoicing and payments. And I think it's very important to understand the implications of request to pay, that it's not simply a service, but it will be a game changer for the bank. And as I thought, I realized that a mindset change is needed, among other things, for the banks. And everyone who thinks about this topic needs to think about it differently, because if we are thinking about an invoice or a payment, if we go back to the concepts and the very basics, what is an invoice and what is a payment, then each of them is really a document which is based on a set of rules, and rules the data exchange or information exchange about an economic transaction. So the invoice is also a document. It is governed by the tax and accounting rules, while the payment is also especially an electronic payment is also a document or a message which is exchanged by two counterparties, and it is also prepared based on a set of rules. And if we are thinking about these things, then, in essence, the invoice and the payment conceptually is very similar, or even identical to each other. It's just the rules that are differing from each other that are governing these documents. And I realized that the problem is with the current manifestation of these things, because when we are thinking about an invoice, everyone, at least as of now, thinks of a piece of paper or a PDF image. While when we are talking about an electronic payment, then we are talking about a bank transfer. And it's more closely to our concept of sending an electronic standardized message between banks. While the invoice is really just a piece of paper, we don't associate with the invoice with an electronic data exchange. And I think that is something that needs to be understood, that the manifestation, the current manifestation at least, should not limit what we are thinking about these documents, because from now on, as e-invoicing is coming, the invoice will also be a structured data message, and the payment will also be a standardized structured data message between two counterparties. And if you are thinking about these, then our thinking and how to link the invoicing and the payments will completely change. And why I'm saying this? Because if we are thinking about a purchase to pay or an order to cash process, then you can see that there are different data sets that describe this process. There is always an order, a contract, there can be a certificate for delivery, there is the invoice, there is the payment, and each invoice must be either paid or immediately or needs to be financed from a financing source. But if we have a look at these data sets, then we find that the invoice data is the deepest and widest and richest data set in the purchase to pay process. So this invoice data should be treated as a strategic asset for banking. And when we are thinking about request to pay, an invoice indeed is a request to pay, because if I send an invoice to someone, then I will want to get this invoice paid, and this new request to pay service that has been or being set up in many countries is just the standardization of this rule that an invoice is a payment request indeed. So we should think about both about the invoice, both about the payment and the payment request, and even a financing request in terms of not what needs to be done also, or what is the process for sending or receiving an invoice or a payment or financing, but what is the content of the information that is exchanged between the parties. And this exchange of information can be described in a standardized way. And for this, there are the standards. There are the standards for the invoicing. There are the standards that are already laid down for payments. There are the standards that are already laid out for the request to pay services. So we need to think about all these things, not as about specific use cases, but as a common denominator, a structured data exchange between the counterparties and the service providers. So I think this is the essence of the mindset change that needs to be understood if someone wants really to utilize the value of all this data within banking.